1542, October 3, 1993. Mogadishu breathes heat at 38 degrees and the helicopters are already descending. 19 aircraft cut low over tin roofs while 12 vehicles push into streets too narrow to turn. The mission is calculated at 30 minutes. It stretches toward 15 hours. 2 Black Hawks will fall. 160 men will remain inside a city that is closing around them. Records will later show the request for tanks and gunships was denied months earlier as incompatible with optics. 80 kilometers away, armor sits idle. Above them, no heavy fire support exists. The streets fill instead. Every alley holds rifles. Every rooftop becomes a decision. They are not reinforced. They are not extracted. They only have each other. In August 1993, a formal request is submitted through command channels. It specifies 2 assets, AC-130 gunships and M1A1 tanks. The justification is recorded in operational language. Mogadishu is fragmenting. Militia strength is increasing. Ambush patterns are evolving. The response from Washington is documented and archived. The request is denied. The phrasing is measured. It is deemed incompatible with a humanitarian mandate. Post-action reviews will later confirm the ratio. A mission designed for rapid capture is executed without heavy support in a hostile urban grid. The decision remains unchanged through October. When the operation begins, the force deploys with light helicopters, ground vehicles, and internal coordination only. No armored fallback exists. No overwatch platform is assigned. The structure is intact. The margin is removed. The city closes slowly at first. Then all at once. The alleys measure 1 to 2 meters across. Walls are thick, packed earth. Roofs are layered with sheet metal that blocks aerial sightlines. Heat presses down. 30,000 civilians move through the same grid. Some carry water. Some carry rifles. At 16:20, the first helicopter falls 3 blocks from the target. The formation breaks without command. Small groups form where they land. Radios fill with overlapping voices. No single picture remains. At 16:40, a second helicopter goes down in a different sector. The map fractures again. Streets that were entry routes become barriers. Vehicles cannot pass. Corners cannot be seen. Each alley becomes its own battlefield. There is no perimeter. There is no rear. They move by instinct now. Count rounds. Check corners. Pull wounded. Heat, dust, noise. Then brief silence between. Bursts. Heartbeats measured in seconds. No extraction route appears. No external force is visible. The sky offers no answer. They hold where they stand. Sergeant First Class Randy Sugart lies prone behind a low wall of broken masonry, Delta Force, C Squadron. His posture is flat, almost casual, as if the rounds snapping overhead belong to another distance. 8 years in units like this have removed hesitation. He watches the crash site of the second helicopter through a narrow gap between structures. The pilot is alive. Surrounded. He does not ask what the probability is. He already knows. The request goes up once. Denied. A second time. Denied again. He adjusts his grip, checks the angle, counts without moving his lips. The third request is approved because there is no acceptable alternative left. He stands. Moves toward the landing point that is no longer secure. No explanation needed. Before stepping out, he reaches into his pack and pulls a small laminated checklist. Equipment verification. He scans it once, slowly, though every line is already memorized. His thumb rests on the edge for a second longer than required. Then it is gone. The card returns to the pocket. He moves. In Washington, the environment is controlled. Fluorescent light. Air-conditioned silence. Secretary of Defense Les Aspin sits at a desk layered with briefing documents. The language is precise. Budget allocations. Mission scopes. Constraints tied to international optics. The earlier request for armored support remains in the file system, processed and closed. The decision was measured. Appropriate to mandate. On the morning of October 4th, casualty figures arrive. Numbers first. Then names. 18 dead. 73 wounded. The assistant places the report within reach. Aspin's hand moves toward it, then stops halfway. Fingers rest against the paper without turning it. His eyes fix on the top line but do not move across it. The timeline in his head does not match the one on the page. No one speaks. The larger system makes its decision in August and does not revisit it. The request for armor and aerial fire support is evaluated against political framing, not ground reality. It is declined. The operational package remains light. When the mission unfolds on October 3rd, that decision becomes a fixed condition. 2 helicopters are lost within the first hour. Extraction routes collapse. A quick reaction force is not in position. Records later establish the interval with precision. 10 hours and 13 minutes pass before reinforcement reaches the trapped elements. During that gap, there are no tanks to break roadblocks. No AC-130 to suppress massed fighters. Casualty figures accumulate in predictable sequence. 18 Americans killed. 73 wounded. Between 200 and 500 Somali civilians dead, alongside approximately 1,000 militia fighters. The system does not adapt in real time. It absorbs loss and waits for the timeline it already approved. Inside the city, the smaller force does the opposite. It does not wait. It fragments and then stabilizes at the lowest level. Groups form around the most experienced man present, not the highest rank. Delta operators average 8 years in continuous combat environments. They do not request permission to act within their perimeter. They assign sectors. Establish fields of fire. Redistribute ammunition. Rangers with 2 years of service lock into those decisions without debate. No one attempts to restore the original plan. That plan is already gone. Each position becomes a fixed point. They hold intersections that were never meant to be held. They defend crash sites with no expectation of extraction. Communication is partial, sometimes absent, but intent is consistent. Protect the wounded. Deny the enemy ground. Maintain cohesion at the smallest scale possible. Hours pass without relief. Heat gives way to darkness. The volume of fire rises, then falls, then rises again. No unit breaks. No perimeter collapses. Not a single position is overrun. By the time armored vehicles finally enter the city after 1:55, 142 of the 160 men are still alive and able to move out under their own power. Both downed helicopter crews are defended to the final moment. One pilot survives captivity. The other does not. No body is abandoned without resistance. No soldier is left without someone beside him. 2 systems face the same night. One delays and measures. One acts and holds. The outcome is counted in names. Senate Armed Services Committee hearings, October 1993, record the testimony without embellishment. General William Garrison states the conclusion in a single line. The mission was executed with less than required. The difference was paid by his soldiers. RAND-style post-action analysis later categorizes the engagement as a failure of force alignment, not execution. The doctrine is clear in hindsight. Light infantry inserted into dense urban terrain without armored support produces extended engagement windows and delayed extraction timelines. The numbers are consistent across reports. The structure was insufficient for the environment. Internal admissions follow within weeks. Secretary of Defense Les Aspin appears before Congress. His language remains controlled, but one phrase enters the record. The denial of armored support is acknowledged as a mistake in retrospect. No qualification removes it. Years later, presidential memoirs restate the same gap in broader terms. Good intentions and military capability are not interchangeable. When separated, the cost is measured in lives. The system recognizes the distance only after it is crossed. Confirmation comes from the other side. Osman Atto, financier within AIDED's network, is interviewed after his capture. His statement is direct. They expected the Americans to withdraw once the helicopters were down. That is how previous forces had behaved. This time, they did not leave. They stayed through the night and continued to fight. AIDED's own communication avoids the word victory. It uses a different phrase. Successful resistance. The distinction is precise. It acknowledges survival against expectation, not dominance. 3 weeks after the night in Mogadishu, the system changes its language without announcing it. Requests that had been filtered, delayed, weighed against optics are now approved in full. Armor is authorized. AC-130 gunships are assigned. The documentation does not explain the reversal. It does not need to. What is removed is hesitation at the top. What is shortened is the distance between request and deployment. Authority begins to move downward. Not debated. Applied. A decade later, the difference is measured in minutes, not memos. Fallujah, April 2004. A Delta team leader receives a target location at 2 o'clock. Under the previous structure, the request would climb layers, wait for alignment, return hours later when the window is gone. This time, it does not leave the room. The decision is made at his level. 11 minutes. Approval, coordination, execution. The target is taken at 2:47. No extended firefight. No second night. The gap that once stretched across 10 hours is compressed into a single operational breath. The system above does not catch up. It no longer needs to. By 2006, the change reaches its sharpest edge. Abu Musab al-Zarqawi is located. The chain that once delayed action is replaced by a joint structure designed for speed. Joint Interagency Task Force. Information flows without pause. Authorization does not climb. It settles where the information arrives. From confirmed coordinates to strike, less than 12 minutes pass. An F-16 releases its payload. The target does not move in time. Speed becomes policy. 15 hours inside a city that was supposed to last 30 minutes. 10 hours waiting for a force that should have been there from the start. Those numbers do not mark failure alone. They mark the exact distance between decision and consequence. The distance was closed later. Not in Mogadishu. After it. The lesson remains where structures begin to believe their own timelines. Decisions made in clean rooms carry forward into places where there is no pause, no revision, no second vote. The cost travels downward. It always does. Money can buy tanks and gunships. But sending them at the right moment demands something no system can automate. When the clock runs out and the system above you is still thinking, do you follow the plan, or the man next to you? Tell us below.